Good afternoon. Welcome to the last breakout session before lunch. And I have to say, I've really lucked out as a room coordinator this time around. I've got to introduce some incredible speakers. And in fact, this is also the second year in the trot that I've had the privilege, the honor of introducing Donna to speak. This year, she'll be teaching us how to build incredible and great teams. So without further ado, please give it up for Donna.
Thank you very much, Rob. And hi, everyone. So a lot of you know me. I'm Donna. I've been working in the IT industry for 20 years now. Just had my birthday 2 days ago and turned 40, so I'm officially old. Thank you. And predominantly, my focus has been creating great workplace environments and building awesome teams. I believe that all of us deserve to work somewhere where we feel valued and empowered. And for me, this belief came from growing up in a cult where I didn't have a lot of freedom and empowerment. And I was also a victim of domestic violence at 18. And over the years, I've had 3 near-death experiences. And all of these things have really culminated for me in the belief that life is too short to go to work every day and do something that you don't love and that you're not passionate about. So I try and make every day count. I've worked with a lot of senior developers and team leads over the years. And when I was thinking about putting this talk together, I was thinking about what are the kinds of questions that they ask me and what are the things that they are challenged with the most. And the first one was, how do you get interviewing right? You know, how do you make sure you don't bring the wrong people into your team? Because there's a big fear that you have this great team and you don't want to ruin it by getting the wrong people. The other questions that I've heard a lot about is, how do you handle those difficult conversations if you've got someone who's maybe not performing or there's some challenges within the team? You know, how do you handle those conversations as easily and painlessly as possible? So in this talk today, I'm going to run you through the life cycle of building, growing, and nourishing a high-performing team. And I'm going to share what I've learned over the many years and hopefully some easy strategies in the hope that all of us can create amazing workplace environments where our teams can succeed. Starting with build. If you're in here today, you already have some sort of team. And whether that's 2 of you, 5 of you, or 100 of you, there's already going to be an existing culture in place. To build a solid foundation, the 3 areas that we're going to look at are values, vision, and engagement strategy. And I guess I just want to clarify, when I say engagement strategy, don't freak out, it's not going to be all HRE. It's going to be practical things that as a team leader or a senior developer you can do with your team. So culture is made up of the beliefs, values and behaviours that are shared and demonstrated across the organisation. I've heard lots of different explanations over the years, but that's the one that I like the most. It's what's actually demonstrated in your organisation and in your team. And values can be organisation-based or they can just be team-based. It depends on how clear your values are and how big your organisation is. If your organisation has high-level values, you need to really make sure that they're broken down so that they're meaningful for your team. And if your organisation doesn't have clear values, then you need to collaboratively create the values with your team. Once you've got these values, you can then recognise and reward individuals and teams based on those behaviours that are really driving and encouraging the culture. Why do you go to work every day? Why do your team members go to work every day? Do you know what they're trying to achieve? Do they know what they're trying to achieve? It can be really hard to answer that question, but it's really important that people have a clear purpose and understand why they're coming to work every day and what they're doing. So if there's a high-level company vision, which there often is, as a team lead, we need to really break that down for our teams so that it's meaningful and relevant. And then once you've got that clear vision, you want to go even further and really break it down into clear goals. So everybody knows what equals success for me in my role, and for our team, what equals success. One of my favorite books, which I bang on about every time I talk, is How to Find Your Why by Simon Sinek. And if you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. It really talks you through a step-by-step process of how you figure out what that purpose is. And it also talks you through a process you can do with your team to collaboratively figure out what your team purpose is, which is really cool. Another one is Drive by Dan Pink. He's got a whole section around purpose and why it's so important. So engagement strategy. As a team lead or even as a senior developer, it's our job to make sure that there's a plan of how we're going to engage our team. Because if we fail to plan, we plan to fail. So I'm not talking anything hardcore. I'm just talking a one-pager with a few bullet points of the key areas that you're going to focus on. We've already talked about values and vision, which are two of the key areas. For the engagement strategy, you also need to look at collaboration and communication. Collaboration and connection. We'll cover communication later. It's human nature to really want collaboration and connection with other people. So as a leader, it's our job to create those opportunities for our teams to connect and to collaborate, and to put a cadence in place where there's regular events and regular sessions so that our teams can do that. I'm going to run through a specific example of how to do this in the next slide. The other area is communication and transparency. People want regular and transparent communication. So once again, as a leader, it's our job to create different methods that's tailored to different styles. So you need to understand who's in your team, what their different preferred communication styles are, and how you're going to tailor those comms to really suit everybody in your team. And then the third one is reward and recognition. How do you show people that they're valued in your team? Obviously, saying thank you is a nice way to do it, and pretty easy. The studies show that you need 8-to-1 ratio, so 8 pieces of positive reinforcement and thank you before they actually listen and it sinks in. So I think nothing ever beats verbal praise. There's plenty of other options though. Yammer has a praise feature, which is fantastic. LinkedIn has the new kudos feature, which I'm on the fence about, but it's still an option. There's a lot of specific recognition apps and recognition walls that you can implement in your company as well. And then there's awards. So, a monthly, a quarterly, an annual award within your team is a great way to reward and recognize. And then rewards as well. Everybody loves a good voucher or, movie tickets or something like that. And reward and recognition doesn't have to be expensive. The first implementation that I did, I had no budget. So we created a Living the Values awards program. And so every month, peers would nominate each other for displaying the values of the company, and we would select a couple of winners, and we'd print out an A4 certificate and put it in a frame. It wasn't, cost maybe $5. But a year later, I'd be walking around the office, and I'd see people with these frames on their desks still. So it may sound a little bit, silly, but it means a lot to people. So here's just a really easy example of what I'm talking about. As a leader, you don't need to be the one to do all of these things, but it is our job to set a plan and to make sure that these things happen. So this is an example of some of the things that I've done in previous organizations that has worked really well to make sure that we're bringing people together. And the slides will be available later, so you don't have to take a photo. Communication-wise, once again, what types of communication methods are you going to do and how often are you going to do them? You don't have to be the one to implement them, but you need to make sure that it's happening. And communications channel, this is one I found challenging the bigger the company is. Where do you go to find out certain types of comms? Because every company is different, right? And sometimes you just don't even know where to start or where to go. So having a clear cadence like that and to tell people where to go, especially when you're onboarding new people, is really helpful. And recognition programs or a recognition wall, like I said, a visible place where people can recognize and show gratitude. This is one that I've put a team together and created because we couldn't find one that suited our purpose. Just a a place where people can say thanks to each other and create that culture of gratitude. The levels of mental stress, mental health and stress are just rising and rising and rising. So there's plenty of studies that show these cultures of gratitude really help people and your organisation. So now you want to grow your team. You've got a nice foundational culture. The last thing you do is want to hire people that don't either have the skills or don't fit into the culture of your organisation. And the first thing that I want to address is fitting into the culture. It's really important that we change the language about this. We should be looking for people who are going to enhance our culture, so culture add as opposed to culture fit, because culture is always changing and morphing. It never ever stays the same. So we don't want people that are going to fit, we want people that are going to add. As a team leader or senior team member, you have different levels of influence around this process. But 3 of the areas that I think you can make a difference in is where to find and how to get great talent. Interviews, so often you'll be asked to be part of the technical interview process or come up with what that looks like. And also what questions you ask in your interview when you're interviewing to assess that culture add. And then the 3rd area is contributing to your employer brand to help attract the right talent as well. Does anybody here find it really easy to find great technical talent? Excellent, I'm not alone. Couple, Readify, yeah, whatever. Most of us find it really hard, right? So some of the things that you can do is help your recruiters. If you've got internal recruitment, if you don't have internal recruitment, then you'll probably be using an agency, but you can still help them as well. But if you've got your internal recruiters, tell them where they can find these people. Give them an idea of what kind of companies they should be targeting, what kind of meetups that they should go to, what type of conferences like this that they should be at. Give them some of that information that they might not have. Encourage your company to sponsor events like this as well. And social media, promote your people, promote your team, promote the type of projects that you're doing. That is a way that you get people to notice your organisation and to be attracted to come and work for your organisation. LinkedIn groups as well, or Reddit groups. There's so many different platforms that recruiters don't really know about. So as a technical person, you're in the know. You know where all these people are and where they're going. So give your recruiter those tips and help them out a little. The most successful teams that I've ever worked in, we've had a referral percentage of 70% out of all hires. So ideally, you want to be driving your internal referral program and really encouraging people to refer their friends. Because if it is a great culture and a great place to work, they're going to want their friends to come and work with you. So feeding into technical requirements for job adverts is the other area. If you're looking for a full stack developer, for example, think about what kind of skills that you're going to come up with. Generally, you're going to be asked to put together a bullet point list of all the essential skills that they must have. And when I think about all the bullet points that I've seen on adverts, normally there's anywhere from 7 to 12 bullet points of all the things that you need to have to apply for that job. And what I would say is less is more. Every single bullet point you put in your advert is basically creating an objection and potentially stopping someone from applying to that ad. Good people know what they do. Full stack developers know what they do, right? They know what skills they need to have. So use an advert as an opportunity to sell your organisation, not to tell people what they should have when they already know that. And good people can work anywhere, right? They're weighing you up with another 6 or 7 different companies. So use it to really sell all of the benefits that your company has and list them all out on your advert. Also use a tool like Textio for gender neutral wording, and it'll just scan your advert, will give you a bit of a report on where it's at, if there's anything you need to change, because once again, you don't want to create objections. You want as many people as possible to apply. So here's a bit of an example of the way that I would recommend structuring an advert. The first one is about your company, but not, we've been around for 15 years, or not the blah blahs. What's the purpose? Who do you add value to? Who do you help? What kind of customers do you help? And how do you change people's lives, whether it be customers or society? If you're a company, you've got to have a purpose and a vision. So really sell that, because that's what people are interested in. How are we adding value? And then exactly that. How are we adding value in the role that I'm going to join? What will I be doing? How will I contribute to your team? So once again, rather than focusing on the blah blahs, talk about how you can help us. This is what we're looking for. And then, like I said, if you have to have your bullet points, which you actually don't have to, one of the best ads I ever wrote was two paragraphs that had no bullet points. My boss absolutely hated it at the time. He was like, this is the worst advert I've ever seen in my life. And I hired one of the best candidates I've ever hired from Ireland who saw that ad and applied to that ad. So you don't need to have bullet points, but if you have to, try and keep it to a maximum of 3. And then once again, use it as a sell. Use it as an actual advert to sell all of the benefits that you have, because a lot of the time you are going to have a lot of benefits and not everybody has them. I had a client recently who was providing his team with volunteer days, paid volunteer days. And it wasn't on his advert, and it wasn't on any of the careers page or anything else. And I was like, why don't you have this on there? And he's like, well, everybody does that, don't they? No, so you won't even realize some of the things that other companies don't do. And then people. Provide an opportunity for someone to call someone crazy or email someone rather than just having, AI scan through and spit out who's suitable and who's not suitable. People, especially, you all know in the Perth market, right? Everyone's always a bit concerned that their employer might find out that they're applying for another job. So sometimes they're going to want to have a confidential chat with someone. So give them that option on your advert. I know it's a little crazy, but it really works. And then interviewing. So hopefully you've got some decent candidates in your pipeline by this point through all the different things that we've done. Over the years, I was doing a bit of a calculation. I think I've done over 3,000 interviews. And this is some of the feedback. This is based on some of the feedback that I've collected from candidates and from hiring managers. The first one is to make your interview process streamlined. So try and keep it between 2 and 4 interviews or 2 and 4 processes, and be really transparent with the candidates at the beginning of this is what it's going to be. This is how many interviews you're going to have. These are the type of people that you're going to be meeting. Try and be as straightforward and as open as possible with them. And sometimes if you think it might change, just tell them that. Just be transparent and upfront at the beginning. Consistent. You want to be comparing apples with apples. If you're recruiting for .NET developers, then you want to make sure that the questions or the tests that you have, that the process is the same. Because that's, from a fairness perspective, that is the best way to do it. Relevant. If it's a development role, then you want to be testing their coding skills, right? If it's a pre-sales role, then you want to be testing their pre-sales ability or facilitation ability if it's for UX. So make sure that it's really relevant to the role that you're recruiting for. Don't just have a blanket standard process. Make sure that it's objective. So the only way you can be objective is to provide your interviewers with training. So provide them with training on how to assess people. What equals pass? What equals fail? What do you do if you're on the fence? Train them on how to use behavioural questions. Behavioural questions are really important, and we'll give some examples of them shortly. Give them training on unconscious bias, because we all have it. It's not whether we do or don't. It's just about how aware are we of what it is. And the last one is around diversity of interviewers. Make sure that when you're putting your interviewers together, you've got a level of diversity there. I did a management round interview a few months ago, and the recruiter and I realized that we'd put a technical interview together, and it was a guy who was, in his late 30s, early 40s. I'm really bad with age, so I don't know how old he was, but he was, old like me. And he was from the UK, white male from the UK at that age group, and we'd put 2 technical interviewers that were both white males from the UK of the same age group together to make that assessment. So that's not helping anybody, right? So make sure that there's diversity in who's part of your interviews. Demonstrable. So whatever skills the person needs to have, you want to see them in your interview. You need to see them doing it. If it's coding, they need to code. If it's pre-sales, then you give them a scenario and get them to talk through, pretend that you're the customer and get them to talk through that scenario. If it's UX, get them to run a workshop for you or facilitate something. So you really want to make sure that you get to see their skills. Is this echoey? Sounds a bit echoey. The last one is making sure that it's safe. You know, I'm sure everyone's probably had a bad experience with interviewing. So it's not about softening our interview process, but it's about being kind. Think about the worst interviews that you've had and the best interviews that you've had, and then let's do it a different way, a better way. When someone's coming and working for you, they're not going to be freaking out and nervous and stressed most of the time. So you want to give them the chance to perform at their best, which means making them comfortable. Think about the environment, give them some water, make sure that you're not sitting 3 people across a giant boardroom table and really intimidating them. So that safety factor is really helpful. So you've checked their skills, and now it's about making sure that the values and the beliefs and the attitude is in line, and it's going to add to your culture. We all know that a bad apple spoils the whole bunch, so prevention is much better than cure. So you really want to dig deep in your interviews to make sure you're getting the right people. So behavioural-based questions can be created based on your values. So this is one of the reasons that having those underlying values is so important. If your values are about learning, then ask them to tell you about a time where they've learned something new. If your values are about teamwork, or working well in a team, then ask them about a time where they've helped their teammates with something. One of my favourite questions is to ask, if it wasn't for money, what would you spend your time doing? Because it gives a really good insight into what someone's passionate about. Another one that I really like is to tell me about a time where you've improved something or where you've brought some innovation into your team. But like I say, you really need to tailor these to your specific organisational values. One of the things that I would say as a bit of a red flag is if somebody can't tell you about a time where they've failed or made a mistake. So I always ask to tell me about a time where you failed. And it does depend on your culture, but I did say no to someone recently who said to me, I don't do anything unless I'm 100% sure that I'm going to succeed at it. And for the culture of the organisation that I was working in at the time, it just wasn't that wasn't a good fit, because our culture was all about trying, failing, making it safe to fail, innovating. So that was just not the right fit. And I gave that transparent feedback to that candidate after the interviews had finished and he was told he was unsuccessful. I rang him and had a conversation with him, and I asked him to come back in 6 months' time, and I asked him to go and try and make some mistakes. So I think there's a level of honesty and transparency that people really appreciate, and there's no downside to that. Employer brand is really important, especially when you're trying to attract talent from eastern states or from overseas. You know, a lot of the time they don't know who we are or what the brand is. Well, I'm a little bit lucky now in that aspect, but in general, people have never known who the company was that I worked for. So encourage your team to meetups. Meetups and community events are amazing, right? So attend them, host them, talk at them, encourage your company to sponsor. As a lead, spruik your people's personal achievements, professional achievements. Everything is beneficial to your organisation if your team is being successful, so it's all of your success. The Best Place to Work awards are an amazing way as well to attract overseas talent. So if you can get your organisation to go for one of those, they've been really helpful in my experience. Careers page. Make sure that you've got a great careers page on your website or on LinkedIn that you can put real pictures and stories and videos that show your team and show the types of projects that you do. It's a really great way to attract people once again. And benefits. List all of the benefits on your careers page as well. So you've got a great culture, you're hiring great people, and now you want to keep enhancing and not having any issues. So to build a great team, we need to nourish it. And the 3 areas that are really important are empowerment, development, and leadership. So in my experience, empowering a team is absolutely the fastest way to scale and succeed. In my last role, I was in Melbourne for 9 months, and I had 80 direct reports, 80 developers, consultants, direct reports, which is kind of insane, right? Like 80. Like, what are you meant to do with 80? So one of the things that I did collaboratively with the team is put together a leadership group. And with that leadership group, we came up with a collaborative strategy of what we wanted to achieve over the next 12 months. And then each of those people within that team were empowered to own and drive different initiatives across the state and bring in other people from the teams. And over that 9 months, we hit our 15% growth target and we had 95% retention. So empowering people makes your life a lot easier as a leader, and it's what people want. So it's the easiest way to really build a great team. Before I was in Melbourne, I was back here in WA, and we grew our team from 25 to 50 in 6 months. And we retained a 98% average employee satisfaction score. So once again, empowerment, 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 it works. Collaboratively set goals with your team and with individuals. So I'm a big fan of letting people, if they understand what the vision is and what the purpose is, let people come up with their own KPIs. Let people come up with their own goals, because then they're going to pick something that they believe in and that they want to achieve. And it's a lot easier to then let them figure out how they get there. It's our job as a leader to provide, if there's any boundaries, if there's any specific, reporting requirements or deadlines that they need to hit. And it's our job to make sure that we provide them the support that they need and make it safe to fail. But other than that, let them have that empowerment. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that within our team, we've got the right mix of skills and roles to achieve the goals. And that can be tricky. So one of the things that really works is making sure that you're balancing the strength areas within your team. If you let people do what they're good at, generally speaking, they love what they're good at, right? So if you can put a team together and every single person is getting to do what they're good at and what they love, it's happy days. So think about what hats are needed as well within the team. Do you need a scrum master? Do you need a stakeholder, someone who's going to do stakeholder management? Do you need a technical go-to person, mentor? Do you need a cheerleader in your team? Do you need someone with commercial awareness or delivery management? Do you need someone who's risk management focused? So think about all those different hats. They're not necessarily role titles, but they're hats that need to be worn within different teams. And then make sure that you consider those hats when you're putting together a team and putting together those strengths. And also recruiting new people into the team, think about those hats as well. Once again, Dan Pink has a section around autonomy in his book, which talks about all of this in a lot more detail. And Mark Manson has an awesome book, which a lot of you have probably read, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And that book is awesome because it talks about how our brains love solving problems. That's all they want to do. They just want to solve problems. So if you fix all of the problems, it's just going to create more problems. So you actually need to find the problems that you love and find the problems that your team loves, and then just give them all of those problems and they'll have fun solving them. Sounds so simple, right? People always want to keep either developing themselves or developing their career. So building a great team, it's really important that we enable this as a leader. So creating an objective career pathway is important. One of the frameworks that I really like is the SOFIA framework, SFIA, and that's a specific IT framework that has different levels and different capability descriptions that people can use to progress through the organisation. I don't believe as a leader we should be pushing people or babying people when it comes to career development, but it is important that we set up a framework and that we support them with what they're trying to do. The first capability framework that I ever set up was super basic, just with a spreadsheet. I worked with a couple of the technical people and we developed the different role titles and the different descriptions and rolled it out within the business. And it was great because it was transparent. People just want to know the what, why, the how. Readify have a great one called Mad Skills, which is open source, so anybody can access it. And once again, role titles and a really clear description. Transparent processes is important. So when it comes to salaries, salary reviews, when it comes to promotions and how you get promotions and when you get promotions, it's really, really important that you have a clearly defined process and that people know how it works and they know what they need to do to achieve those things and tick those boxes and get their promotion. And from a salary perspective, it's really important that they understand how you're reviewing it, how it's measured, what data do you review, what market rates do you look at. People just want to understand. A lot of time, even if you're not able to give them much because of market rates and CPI and different things, as long as you can explain how you've thought about it, what the process was and why this is the reason, they're going to be a lot more forgiving and a lot more patient with you. Learning, growing, developing, in my experience, is great people really want to know and be able to do this within their organisation. So enabling people to keep progressing with whatever type of learning and developing and training that they want is really important. Whether it be formal PD plans, whether it be quarterly catch-ups with people where you set a couple of goals for the quarter. At Readify, we did retros, which was really great. So the whole purpose of the retro was for people to gather feedback and to set goals and look at how I'm developing and how I'm improving. So making sure, once again, that you're, as a leader, enabling people to keep learning is super important. As a leader, it's really important that we have good self-reflection. So we need to understand what our own strengths and weaknesses are. And we need to have a growth mindset and be looking to improve and be open to taking on feedback. It's super important. We all know the research around people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And with the feedback that I've received over all of those thousands of interviews, absolutely, I would say 70% of the feedback is that that's the reason that people are leaving. So the biggest complaint that I receive is that managers don't listen. Just repeat that. Managers don't listen. And in my experience, when people come to us with a problem, there's two main ways that we respond. The first is we try and solve it for them. Oh, just do this. Oh, just do that. What did you do that for? It's so easy for us to want to just solve their problem. The second is that we give reasons for the issue, which can come across as defensive. Oh, well, yeah, that's because of this. Or you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. This is going on. So that is not a good option either. People just want to be heard and acknowledged most of the time. So the next time that somebody comes to you with a problem or a complaint, honestly, just try listening and acknowledging them. Like this. And then use questions. So ask them for ideas on how they think that they could fix the issue or fix the problem. Ask them for what support they need or they're looking for. A lot of the time people will come up with the answer and will fix it themselves. They just want you to listen. But there is no shortage of challenging conversations and difficult conversations that you do need to have as a leader. I prefer the term courageous conversations, channeling a bit of Brené Brown, because it takes courage to be honest and transparent with people and to practice empathy. And in Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly, she talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy, and it's a really interesting description of it. So I would add that on your reading list as well if you haven't read that one yet. But people respect, trust, and value you if you consistently do this. And I say practice empathy because it can definitely be learnt. As a born perfectionist with unrealistic expectations, I have learned this the hard way. You absolutely can practice it, and you do need it to be a good leader. The other thing that we're often afraid of giving feedback is that it will destroy our relationship with the person. But when you actually think about when was a time that somebody gave me some constructive feedback and gave me some things that I could improve on, if you think about a scenario that's happened for you personally and when it's been delivered in a nice way, generally speaking, what you find is that it strengthens your relationship and it strengthens your bond with that person because you know that they're going to be honest with you and you know that you can trust them. When I left Readify a few months ago, I had 12 people reach out to me and send me an email and ask me if I could give them some constructive feedback of how they can keep progressing. Like, that's amazing. That shows such a huge level of trust that they have reached out and asked for that type of feedback. So there's lots of different feedback models that you can use. I've put this one together because I think it's a nice balance model and yeah, I like it. So the first, and I've called it ours because it is all about us. It's all about us working together. So the first one is tell the person your truth. What's the behaviour that you've observed? What is it that you're concerned about? The second one is seek to understand their truth, because there's your truth and there's their truth, and it's very rarely the same. And often the real truth is somewhere in the middle. So seeking to understand their truth can take quite a while. This part of the conversation can be a good half an hour of really practicing those listening skills and just understanding what is their truth. Once you've really understood that, you can recommend the behaviour change that you're looking for. Now, if it's quite serious and it's essential, then you need to set clear expectations and potentially consequences of if the behaviour doesn't change, what's going to happen. But a lot of the time I've found that just by recommending a suggestion of how you think that they should change things, generally speaking, people want to keep improving and they have the willingness to change. And the third is ask them what support they need. So that's making sure that they've got everything they need to be able to make the change. And also it helps confirm that they've understood what it is that you've asked them to do as well, or the feedback that you've given. Going back to Brené Brown again and Daring Greatly, she says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And that's one of my favourite quotes because in my experience, it's really true. If you're clear and you're honest with someone, that is the kind thing to do because they might not be aware of what's going on. And if no one's going to tell them the truth, they're going to go their whole career, they're going to go to their next job and their next job, and they're not going to understand what everybody is saying about them or the reason that they weren't successful. So clear is kind. Here is a bit of a snapshot of the building blocks that we have covered today to enable building a great team in my experience. I did so well with time. I timed it last night. It took 10 minutes longer. So that means we have time for some Q&A. So it does take courage to be a leader and to step into all of this as opposed to away from all of this, because it's really easy to just put your blinkers on and pretend that nothing's going on. But I do promise that it gets easier the more you practice these techniques. And it's a real privilege to be a leader, to be able to help people live their best lives and come to work and have an amazing time and love what they do. It's an absolutely huge privilege. So I do have a bunch of stickers down here. I also would love to connect with people on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I am available after this for any questions as well. But we may as well, and I'm springing this on you, Rob, sorry, but I'm more than happy to do some curly questions if anyone's got any. Oh, yes.
I've got terrible aim. I would do that too.
Hello. Just jumping back to your job ads.
Yes.
So you talked about potentially eliminating the bullet points, and you said you've done that before successfully. I guess the first thing that springs to mind for me then is that would create like a lot of noise that you need to process of unqualified people for the position you're looking for. And then also potentially it would be a barrier in itself in that if I'm a .NET developer and I don't know that this is a .NET job specifically, I might be less inclined to apply for that. Do you find that happens at all?
Yeah, so I'm not saying take away the job description, if that makes sense. So if it's a .NET developer role, then firstly your title is probably going to be .NET developer. But when you're talking about it might not be. It might be senior consultant or developer. You are correct. But when you're talking about your description of what you're going to bring to the team, what you're going to do, the description would say that. So it would say, you'll be working with a fantastic team of developers, bringing your .NET skills to be able to enhance this particular application or adding value to this customer through your exceptional .NET skills. So you can still put, it's just about when you've got this criteria, this criteria, this criteria, it's tiring for people and it's off-putting for people. The other part of your question, though, was lots and lots of applicants. So I don't know about everyone's experience here, but for me, I get the same amount of crappy, irrelevant applications that come through regardless of how many bullet points I put on my job advert. So you're always going to have a bunch that are completely not relevant, but what you're trying to capture is that small portion that actually are exceptional that you don't want to miss out on. So I would always take more over less, because you're still going to get all the crappy ones, unfortunately. Where I would say this wouldn't work is if it is if it's a job advert for an admin assistant, for example. If it's a job advert where you know you're going to get heaps of good applications, you don't need to worry about this. But this is technical people. You really want to get the best applications.
Cool, we have time for a couple more questions.
I can't see anything. Oh, yeah.
That's all right, I got it.
It's so bright.
A question for, which might also flip over the other side to people actually applying. How much weight in the modern world do you put on receiving CVs, and what methods do you use to pick the wheat from the chaff?
What was the last line?
Finding the diamonds in the rough.
Yeah, so look, I'm a big fan of being able to apply without CVs. I'm a big fan of being able to use LinkedIn profiles, with the caveat that you do need to flesh out your LinkedIn profile with a description for roles, not just role titles, which I have seen a few of those. That's not particularly helpful. And I was able to apply for my last role with my LinkedIn CV, and that is becoming more and more popular. So I would say if you've got a LinkedIn profile, start thinking about using that and flesh it out just a little bit. But CVs are, I guess they're a baseline, right? You're looking at, for me, I'm looking at what type of roles the person's done, what type of experience do they have, how long they've stayed at different companies. One thing I'd always be careful of is calling out contract roles versus permanent roles. So sometimes I look at a CV and someone's kind of gone 3 months, 6 months, 6 months, and I've gone, oh, you know, they move around a bit. But they were contract roles, but they didn't put it on their CV. So that's kind of a bit of a tip that I would say. But I think either CVs or LinkedIn profiles are still, you need something to get an idea to help weed through all the applications. But referrals is always the best. Referrals, referrals, referrals.
Cool, so one last question. Too many hands. Oh.
Hi, do you have any tips for introverts to be more effective where they have the option to influence team culture?
To influence team culture, what was the first bit?
So my personality is more like 80% of an introvert. So, and I'm in a position where I can influence team culture, and I'm like part of a new team that's forming and storming right now. So that's where I struggle. I'm just wondering if you have any tips for.
Yeah, I think, great question, because I'm sure at least 50% of the room, have the same problem. So I think it's no different. In some ways, it's no different whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, because as a team leader or as a senior person, what it's all about is getting other people together with you to do it together. It's not about needing to do it by yourself. So, you know, figure out who's passionate about culture, who's on the same page about what you're trying to do within your team, and who's passionate about success, and then have those conversations, you know, together, and then get a few people with you to help grow that within the team. So you don't have to be standing up going, rah, 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 everybody do this. I find a lot of the leaders that I've met, the best leaders I've ever met have been introverts. So yeah, it's more about, is it the right type of company you're working for, where they value you? Because that is one of the challenges that I've seen, especially in consulting, where the only people that get promoted or valued are people that are loud, salesy, and so that can be a challenge. Is the culture of the company that you're working for, do they value you as an introvert or not? And sometimes that can be a problem.
Thank you. That was thought-provoking and inspiring. Could you please join me for one last round of applause for Donna? Thank you.
Thank you. And there's lots of stickers.